He ended the sermon like always. Calm voice, hands raised, sweat glistening under the stained glass light. But when he stepped outside, he never made it to his car. Reverend Elijah Monroe had been preaching in that church for 22 years. Never missed a Sunday. Never missed a funeral. Until that one strange March morning, he walked out the front door, still wearing his robe. Choir was packing up. Someone said he waved to the cemetery across the road. No one thought twice. By evening, he hadn't come home. His wife called the deacons. They checked his office, his car. Empty. His Bible was gone. So was his wooden cross necklace. Police were called, flyers made. The town posted search teams, hounds, helicopters. No scent, no blood, no body. Just silence, like he stepped into air and disappeared. There were whispers in town. Some said he ran. Others said he was taken. But his wife never believed either. She said, "He went where he was called." And she kept saying that, year after year, even after the case went cold, even after the church closed, even after they stopped printing his name. In her house, the guest room stayed untouched. Robe on the hanger, shoes under the bed, Bible missing. One candle still lit beside the window. The tree line behind the church was never cleared. Old woods, thick with vines. His wife said she heard hymns from there sometimes. Nobody believed her. But she wasn't wrong. The forest behind the old church hadn't been touched in decades. Overgrown, tangled, almost sacred. Then in 2002, a logger was hired to clear the edges for new development. His name was Roy. Worked alone, quiet guy. Didn't know much about the church's past. Just that the trees were thick and old, and the job paid well. First week was smooth. Dead branches, rotting trunks. Then, on day 8, his saw hit something hard, deep in the root of a tree that should have been solid. He stopped the blade, dug around it with his gloves. Thought it might be a rock, but it was wood. Different color, smooth, shaped, man-made. He pulled back bark and found a wooden cross. Old, but perfectly preserved. Not buried in the dirt. Grown into the tree, like the forest had swallowed it. The name carved in the center made his breath catch. Elijah Monroe. He didn't know the story, but the name itched something in the back of his mind. He wrapped the cross in his flannel and took it home. That night, the cross leaked sap onto his kitchen counter. Slow drips, thick, golden. But it smelled like something he couldn't place. Incense? Or blood? He tried to sleep, but kept waking to voices. Not clear. Just distant hymns, like a choir lost in fog. He didn't know any gospel songs, but he heard them. Next morning, his flannel was gone. The cross sat upright by the door. Word spread fast. Small towns are like that. The logger mentioned the name at a diner, and an old woman dropped her coffee cup and whispered, "That's him." It didn't take long before they told Elijah's wife. She hadn't been seen in town in years, but when she heard what the logger found, she came back. She asked to see the cross. Roy hesitated, but handed it over. She held it like a child, not surprised, just tired, like she'd been waiting for this. "He told me," she said. "Said if they ever cut into the forest, he'd return. Not all of him, just the piece that mattered." Roy asked what that meant. She didn't explain, just wrapped the cross in a silk scarf and said, "It's not done leaking yet." That night, the lights in Roy's cabin flickered. The wind outside stopped. And for 2 minutes, he swore someone was preaching in the woods. He opened the door. No one there. But his saw was missing. In its place, a Bible he'd never owned. Pages open to Revelations. The name Elijah was underlined 3 times in red ink. A line beside it read, "Called from the roots." He returned the cross to the woman the next morning. But the scarf was soaked, not in sap, in something darker. She didn't flinch. She said, "He's bleeding through." Roy went back to the stump. Wanted to show someone where he found it. GPS marked it. He remembered the way. But when he got there, no stump, just roots, fresh grass, no cut wood, no sap. Like it was never there. He called the land office, asked for old maps. They sent him blueprints from the 60s. The area where he cut. No trees ever documented. He asked the town historian. She looked at the plot and frowned. That land belonged to the church, was never cleared, never mapped. It wasn't supposed to be touched. He asked, "Why?" She pulled out an old church ledger. March 1977. Last note by Pastor Monroe. "Do not touch the roots. That's where he speaks." She closed the book, said, "Some men leave footprints, some leave anchors." Roy felt the weight of it then, not just guilt, gravity, like something had been loosened, and now it wanted out. That night, his dreams turned to sermons. Not his, not Monroe's, but something deeper. Repeated lines, looped voices. Let the tree speak back. He woke up with dirt under his nails. The town started hearing things. Hums in the forest. Lights through the trees. Some said it was kids. Others said it was the wind. But the sound? Always gospel. One hunter claimed he saw figures in the woods. White robes, no faces, just mouths moving in harmony. He didn't return the next day. Left his boots by the tree line. Nothing else. The sheriff said the case was weird, but not foul play. Closed it. But others whispered that he wasn't the first. The church reopened briefly. Just one service, led by no one. But somehow, a sermon played over the old speakers. Elijah's voice. He spoke words no one remembered. Called the town by name. Mentioned the logger. Said the roots had been pierced too soon. The tape recorder was blank. The electricity had been cut for years. Roy stopped sleeping. Kept hearing the same line over and over in his head. The cross was the key, but the stump was the door. One night, he found sap leaking from his ceiling. His attic was empty, but a small wooden nail had been driven into a beam. By hand, carved on the head of the nail. Elijah. Roy tried to forget it. Left town for weeks. Moved in with his brother 2 states over. Didn't say why. But the night after he arrived, the cross was waiting on the porch, wrapped in flannel, still warm, still leaking. He didn't touch it, just stared. The wood had darkened. The name was now burned, not carved. Deep. Black. His brother joked it was a prank, until his dog started howling at the attic. For hours. Then silence. Then wet footprints on the stairs. They called a priest. He refused to come inside. Said the air smelled like soaked sermons. Said something was watching. Roy burned the E cross in the backyard. Stayed up all night to watch it. By morning, the ashes spelled one word in the dirt. Why? He buried the ashes deep, covered them with salt, walked away. But the roots? They never stop growing. And some things you don't get to cut twice. The old church had been empty for years. Roof caved in. Pews rotted out. But then the janitor quit. Said he saw someone preaching there at midnight. Not a man, not a ghost, just a voice. Full, booming, and sad. Said the name Roy like a hymn. Next day, the pulpit was back. Rebuilt. Clean. Fresh wood. With Elijah's initials carved in the center. The cross Roy had burned sat on top. Whole again. Sapless. Silent. The townspeople gathered. No one dared move it. They just stared. One woman fainted. She swore she heard him say, "That wasn't the real Forrest." That night, the bell rang. First time in decades. No rope, no hands, just one long chime. And then, silence. Roy didn't sleep. Drove to the edge of the forest. Waited. But the woods were still. Too still. The moonlight caught something on his windshield, written in sap. You split the tree. Now split the truth. He turned off the car and walked in alone. Roy followed the path he'd walked a dozen times. Only this time, the forest wasn't still. It breathed. Leaves rustled without wind. Roots shifted underfoot. The cross was gone from the church. But that night, sap began, leaking from the trees behind the altar. Thick, slow, glowing faintly in the dark. Kids dared each other to touch it. One did. He stopped speaking for 2 days. Said he dreamt of voices singing beneath the roots. The town sealed the church again, but sap showed up elsewhere. Mailboxes, fences, windowsills. Anywhere wood met silence. Roy tried to leave again, packed everything. But his truck wouldn't start. The radio played static, and then Elijah's voice. "We haven't finished." Roy dug out the ashes, found the cross whole again, and a note. The sap's just memory, and memory doesn't rot. He called the old pastor's wife. No answer. Drove to her house. Empty. Candle burned out. Table set for one. On the plate, a slip of paper. One word, return. He took the cross back to the woods. But they weren't the same woods. They were wider, older, and waiting. The sap was dripping from the sky. By the end of that week, most folks stopped remembering Elijah. Like his name faded off their tongues. Even the sheriff couldn't recall the original search. Roy wrote everything down. but pages disappeared, files corrupted, voices stopped returning, calls. He wasn't being ignored. They genuinely forgot. The town historian vanished. Her office locked. Inside, nothing but a wall of photos, every one with a hole burned where Elijah once stood. Only the church held his shape, the pulpit, the hymns, the bell. They remembered. A visiting preacher stepped inside, said the air tasted like endings, said he couldn't find the door he entered through. He left before sunset, drove straight into the forest. His truck was found 2 days later, still running. Empty. Driver's seat soaked in sap. Roy walked back to the site. Sap trailed every tree, led in a spiral. At the center, a new stump, freshly cut, bleeding. He ran his fingers across the bark. A heartbeat pulsed beneath it. He whispered Elijah's name. The stump whispered back. Root deeper. At 3:33 a.m., the church lights flicked on. No power, just glow. Inside, the old cassette player clicked. And Elijah's voice began again. Not the same sermon. A new one. Addressed to Roy. Word for word. Every doubt. Every fear. Every cut. Roy dropped to his knees. He wasn't crying. He was remembering. The voice said, "Truth grows crooked when cut too early. Let the rings complete." Roy blacked out, woke up at home, mud on his boots, sap on his hands, a small splinter in his palm, shaped like a cross. That day, he bought lumber, built a new pulpit, didn't ask why. The townspeople came, uninvited, one by one, like drawn by echo. No one spoke. They just listened as the wind carried Elijah's voice. Roy didn't preach, but his mouth moved anyway. And outside, the forest stood perfectly still. They tried to cut down the stump. Forestry crew came with permits, sharpest blades, new saws, but none made a dent. The bark was too soft, too alive. One man swung an axe. It broke in half. The splinters pierced his gloves. He didn't return to town. Roy visited the stump that night, laid his hand on it, whispered, "You want me to speak again?" The bark pulsed once. Sap ran like veins. Roy cut his hand on accident. A drop of blood hit the stump. It hissed, then sang. Low, harmonic, like an organ tuning itself. The next day, the church smelled of cedar. The pews glowed, and the Bible on the altar had a new verse, one not in any scripture. It read, "And he who touched the root shall carry the voice of the buried." Roy started coughing sap. Not phlegm, sap. At night, his dreams turned to hymns, endless hymns, and Elijah stood in each one, smiling, hands muddy. "Soon," he said, "soon you'll preach beneath the soil." Children in town began humming, strange tunes, same melody, no words. Their parents thought it was cute, until they realized none of the kids remembered learning it. One kid pointed to the church and said, "That's where the echo lives." Another said, "There's a preacher in the tree. He talks when I sleep." Roy heard the tune, too, everywhere, in pipes, in drains, in birdsong, but always ending on the same note, unfinished. He played it on a recorder, slowed it down. When he reversed it, Elijah's last sermon played beneath the notes. He took it to the sheriff. But the sheriff had no idea who Elijah was. Only the church remembered. And maybe the children. Roy wrote everything on the walls: names, dates, trees, voices. But the ink ran in sap every morning. He stopped sleeping, waited for the stump to bloom, waited for the next sermon, because the choir without faces was almost ready. Roy found a candle under his porch, still burning, wax dripping upward. The scent was familiar, the same used during Elijah's old healing services. He brought it inside, set it on the floor. It flickered in patterns, left, right, still. Morse code? He started writing it down. It spelled a phrase: "I never left." Roy asked aloud, "Then where are you?" The candle went out. The flame vanished, but the wick stayed glowing. Outside, sap began forming letters on the trees. Roy followed them, deeper into the woods, deeper than he'd ever dared. The forest floor opened slightly. Beneath the roots, a space, hollow, breathing. He crawled inside, saw a circle of candles, and at the center, a pulpit grown from bark. On the pulpit, Elijah's cross, still dripping, and written beneath it, "Preach until the tree stops listening." Roy didn't remember getting home, but his boots were muddy, his hands sticky. On his mirror, sap spelled, "You spoke well." He checked his recorder. 12 minutes of silence. Then his own voice, preaching. But the words weren't his. He spoke of burial, of cycles, of voices in the trunk. Said, "The stump is a memory loop, and I've been inside it before." Roy stopped eating. Couldn't taste. Everything he consumed tasted like cedar, smelled like sermons. He walked through town. Trees bowed slightly when he passed. Kids hummed. Elders whispered prayers without realizing it. At the church, the walls began weeping sap. Not leaking, weeping. Roy traced the trails. They all led to one corner. Elijah's old office. Behind the wall, a second room. Hidden. Inside, an altar. A single photo of Roy, taken years ago. Written on it, "You were chosen before the roots." He whispered, "What am I?" The altar pulsed once. A storm came. Not rain, sap. It poured from the sky. Amber gold. Sweet. But the town knew not to open their mouths. One man did, and he forgot his name the next day. Couldn't remember family. Only hymns. The town sealed itself in, but Roy stood in the street, arms raised. The sap didn't touch him. It parted. The storm ended at midnight. A single note played across town, piano, off-key, familiar. The stump in the woods now glowed faintly. Its rings moved, spinning slowly, like clockwork. Roy stood over it, preached, with no audience, with no voice. Yet the trees leaned in. He said the sermon from his dream, word for word. We're not seeds, we're echoes. A vine wrapped around his wrist, not tight, not painful, just present. He finished. The stump pulsed. The woods went silent. And from beneath the ground, applause. Roy disappeared the next morning. His cabin door left open. Cross gone. Journal full of unfinished sermons. The town barely noticed. Or remembered. Like a page was torn from time. The children still hummed, but now in harmony. The church bell rang every 3 days. Same time, 3:33 a.m. The sheriff reopened Elijah's case, but the file was blank. Paper aged. No ink. Just one sticky note. Version 2. The forest expanded, grew past old roads, swallowed one barn whole. Roy's brother received a box. Inside, boots covered in sap. A recorder. One clip. Roy saying, "Tell them to root down, not out." He moved far away. But every window in his house grew vines. He boarded them, burned them. But they returned, always shaped like crosses. He left his house for good when the vines whispered in Elijah's voice, "Preach what's buried." The stump began to rot, slowly, deliberately. But the smell wasn't decay. It was myrrh, church incense, memory. A boy fell into the hole beside it. Came out days later, eyes white, mouth humming. He couldn't speak, but drew sermons in the dirt, all signed E.M. The town held a meeting, decided to fence off the church, keep kids away. But overnight, the fence was replaced with pews, facing the stump, all perfectly arranged. At night, lights flickered across the branches. Not fireflies, not lightning. Morse again. It spelled, "You will all attend." One night, someone played piano in the church. An old hymn. A woman who hadn't played in decades said she didn't remember doing it. She collapsed after the final note. Eyes wide, whispered, "He's not in the roots. He is the roots." And the lights in the woods went out all at once. Everyone received the letter. No postmark, just a folded parchment, handwritten in ink that smelled like cedar. Inside, "You are invited to the final sermon. Come willingly," or "Come remembering." Some laughed, others burned theirs, but most kept it. The children all walked to the woods that night, silent. No one stopped them. No one could. Parents followed, slowly, drawn, like memory was gravity. Roy's brother returned to town, walked straight into the church, sat on the front pew, didn't speak, just smiled. At midnight, the trees opened, formed an aisle, a path lit by sap, and from the stump, a voice. Elijah's voice. Not ghostly, not recorded, real. He said, "Thank you for returning. The roots, remember." And the forest bowed. The crowd gathered around the stump. Quiet. No whispers, no phones, just the wind humming Elijah's old hymn, the one no one taught the children. A pulpit rose from the roots. No hands touched it. It simply grew. Bark turning smooth, sap running clean down its sides. Roy stood behind it. Somehow, dressed in Elijah's robe, not blinking, not breathing, just present. He spoke one line. This is not a resurrection. This is a remembering. The crowd sang, not with words, with breath, with memory, like they'd done it 1,000 times. Above them, trees moved in rhythm, no wind, just motion, like they were nodding along. Roy raised his arms. The roots lifted. The stump cracked open. Inside, a circle of wooden crosses, all carved with the same name, Elijah Monroe, and in the center, a seed, still pulsing, still wet with sap. He whispered, "Plant it where they forgot." Roy left town at sunrise. No suitcase, no map. Just the seed in his pocket, still warm, still humming softly. He drove until the road turned to gravel, then dirt, then trees, and finally it disappeared completely. Just forest, pure and untouched. But his car kept going, like the forest let it. He stopped in a clearing, dug with bare hands, planted the seed. Within minutes, the ground cracked. Roots burst through like veins. He heard Elijah's voice again. Now let them remember. Roy walked back to the car, but it was gone. In its place, a trail of sap footprints. He followed them back to the road. But it wasn't the same road. It led straight to the church. Only this time, it was new. No one built it. No one claimed it. But the church was there. New walls, fresh, wood and doors that opened without touch. The town gathered again, drawn, not invited, just like before. Inside, no pastor, no preacher, just a pulpit, and on it, the cross. No sap, no stain, just the name, Elijah. The children led the service. They sang the hymn, Whole Now, Full. Each pew glowed faintly, like soaked in memory. Roy sat in the back, silent, watching, crying. He whispered, "You're home." The lights dimmed. The trees outside bowed. And for the first time in 25 years, the forest exhaled. The sap stopped flowing. Roy knew it wasn't over. The church stood, but the ground beneath still pulsed. He dug again, found a second root, darker, sharper, carved with names he didn't recognize. Elijah's voice returned, "For every sermon, there's a shadow." Roy kept digging, deeper, until he hit wood, not tree, door. He opened it. Cold air rushed upward, the smell of forgotten prayers. Inside, pews, rotting, upside down, mirrors instead of Bibles. A sermon played in reverse, every word pulled at his memory. He tried to leave. The door was gone, but someone grabbed his hand. Elijah, younger, afraid. He said, "Don't let them bury this root too." Roy escaped the hollow, barely. But the forest had changed. Every tree now had a name carved into it. Thousands. Some ancient, some new. He found his own. Fresh. Still warm. Beneath it, a hymn began to hum. The townspeople couldn't see it. Only Roy. Only those who'd touched the stump. He brought them, one by one, showed them their names. Each one sang, then wept, then forgot again. He realized the forest wasn't haunted. It was remembering. Elijah hadn't vanished. He had been planted. Roy fell to his knees, thanked the roots, thanked the silence. And for a moment, the trees sang back. The final sermon came from nowhere. It played on every speaker in town. At the same time, same voice. Elijah. He spoke of remembering what never was, of carrying echoes, of planting grief like seeds. People stopped their cars, sat on sidewalks, crying, listening, some laughing. One child whispered, "He's in the leaves now." The stump in the forest vanished, just roots now, still pulsing. The cross returned to Roy's hands, dry, empty, at peace. He placed it at the altar, walked out, never turned back. The church lights flickered once, then stayed off. The forest didn't grow again. It stayed exactly as it was, like it was finally listening. Years passed. The town didn't speak of the stump anymore, but the church stayed open, always clean, always quiet. People came from other places, sat in silence, left small carvings at the altar. The children still sang, not loud, just under their breath. The tune never left. Roy became a name, then a story, then a hymn. One tree still grows at the edge, crooked, taller than the rest, carved with one word, stay. No more sap, no more sermons, just wind. And every year, on March 14th, the Beebi pulpit glows faintly. People gather. No pastor, no preacher, just memory. Someone hums the first note. The forest hums back. And Elijah Monroe is never forgotten. The pulpit remained untouched, not aged, not weathered, just still, as if it remembered every word spoken and waited for more. A new pastor moved to town. Said he didn't believe in ghosts. Said he came for peace. He stepped inside the church. The moment he touched the pulpit, he fainted. When he woke, he whispered Elijah's first sermon, word for word. He didn't remember doing it, didn't know who Elijah was, but he wept after every line. They kept him on, called it a gift, said the church had chosen him. Every Sunday he preached, but never prepared, and never remembered afterward. Someone recorded him, played it backwards, the same hymn, every time, the one from the forest. The trees outside leaned closer each week, and the cross on the altar never gathered dust. A girl found an old map beneath the church floorboards, marked with rings, each circle labeled with names. In the center, Elijah Monroe. Around it, towns she'd never heard of. She traced them. Each one had a stump. Each one had a pulpit. She went online, found forums, photos, people whispering about trees that bled, sermons that never ended. The map updated itself. Each day, a new name added, a new ring. She realized this wasn't a story. It was a network, a root system. The map whispered one night, through headphones, said, "You're in the next circle." She burned it, but the ashes left sap stains on her desk. Now, Every notebook she opens bleeds ink in cursive. Version 3. And she's never walked through woods again. The town stopped expanding. Literally. Roads cracked when widened. New buildings leaned toward the church. Planted flowers grew only around the stump site. All white, all shaped like crosses. Cell service dropped near the altar. Radios played static, then sermons. Always Elijah's voice. People moved in for peace, stayed for something deeper. No one got sick. No one stole. But dreams were different. Everyone dreamed of the same forest, same choir, same pulpit in the roots. Tourists came and left afraid. Locals never noticed. A sign outside town now reads, "Memory lives here," and the last census was handwritten in Elijah's old script. No one remembers filling it out. Behind the church now grows a single tree, taller than the bell tower, bark shaped like a robe, knots where eyes should be. Children call it the Ai-He, preacher tree. Leave candles at its base. Say it hums when you cry. It weeps sap in the spring, smells like cedar and memory. No one cuts it. No one climbs it, but it grows toward the church, slowly, faithfully. One morning, the cross vanished from the altar, found embedded in the tree trunk. The pastor smiled, said, "He's resting now." The tree bent slightly, like it nodded. That night, everyone in town dreamed the same dream. Elijah smiling, sitting at the pulpit in the roots. He said, "You did well. Remember quietly." And the forest, for the first time, was silent. There are no sermons now, no services, just people sitting in the church, listening. The pulpit stands untouched, the cross sealed within the preacher, tree. Children hum hymns without knowing them. Elders smile and nod. The town lives like it always has, rooted. Every March 14th, candles appear on every doorstep. No one knows who lights them. At 3:33 a.m., the bell rings once, always once. The wind carries a line, "Preach what's buried." Visitors still come, try to document it. But no cameras work inside the church. They leave changed. Some forget. Others hum. And the story of Elijah Monroe isn't told anymore. It's simply felt, wherever the roots remember.